Okay, well, I'm sure Peter Huhne will crop up again. Let's move on, because we've got a lot of questions here tonight. And take one from Gus Eldridge, please. Gus Eldridge.
Would the nationalisation of Northern Rock be a massive failure in government policy?
This is the way the Tories put it. Kevin Maguire, what do you think?
Yes, in so much as the government's tried to sell Northern Rock and tried unsuccessfully, but the failure will not be as massive as the failure in the private sector itself and the failure of Northern Rock's management who got it in that position in the first place. They borrowed too much to try and expand that bank. They've got a very good mortgage book, but at a subprime market in the States, they caught a fast cold. And it's almost the government's picking up the pieces. I don't believe any government could have foreseen what was going to happen here. And I think there's a lot of hindsight now. David Cameron and so on were backing the government from the beginning, but they're getting a bit cold feet now. But I can't see any alternative to nationalisation. And when Northern Rock is owing the government possibly £50 billion plus, I would have thought you can pick it up for under 300 million. It's not bad. And instead of just getting it and then looking for a seller, why not turn it into what it used to be? And that used to be a mutual. Give it back to the customers. It ran very well then. It was very profitable. It was only when it was floated on the stock market and the managers who get huge bonuses went for growth that they got in this mess.
I don't understand why you think it would be a failure to nationalise in that case.
Because
you're in favour of it.
Well, it's so un-New Labour to nationalise anything and bring it into public ownership. Had to do with Railtrack in 2002, and Network Rail does a better job, notwithstanding the delays when they managed to cut off North West England just after New Year. But that was the use of private contractors. Okay. And other governments. Margaret Thatcher nationalised the Johnson Matthey Bank in 1984 when that went bust for £1. Ted Heath nationalised Rolls-Royce in 1971 in a single day with a one-line bill. Governments have done it before, but this Labour government has tried to nationalise nothing and is trying to push everything out of the private sector.
Louise Bagshawe.
Oh, Northern Rock is a mess, and we didn't need to be in this position. Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling dithered. They could have sold it to Lloyds TSB. We wouldn't be sitting here talking about it now. They could have prevented... Yes, there was an approach made, and they asked for a line of funding.
Prime Minister said in the House of Commons that they had no offer from Lloyds TSB.
Yes, an interesting way to parse his words. They had no firm offer because when Lloyds TSB made an approach and asked for a certain line of funding, which Alistair Darling had to give in the end anyway, they were turned down. Roadblocks were put in the way of that deal. And if Darling had taken the Bank of England's advice and issued the guarantee earlier, we could have perhaps saved £3 billion worth of deposits. Now, every taxpayer in the audience tonight is exposed to Northern Rock to the tune of £2,200, and I think that's a catastrophic failure. Are we really going to nationalise a high street bank and have politicians running people's mortgages? Is Alistair Darling, if the housing market tanks, going to be foreclosing on British families? The whole thing is a complete mess. No wonder Gordon Brown won't admit to the figures.
Okay. Chris Huhne.
Well, I think the Conservatives are playing a bit of politics here, because the reality is that there has not been a queue of people in the private sector waiting to make offers for Northern Rock. Lloyds TSB didn't get anywhere near the runway, let alone a couple of the other potential consortia that were looking at it. And the reason for that is very simple. This is not a very good time to be selling a bank which is specialised in lending on the housing market. Why not? Because house prices are falling. This is a point where you are frankly getting involved in distress selling. And the reason for having a temporary nationalisation, which is what we've been arguing for all the way through this, is precisely because we need to get back the £55 billion worth of our money which has been lent to keep Northern Rock afloat. And the best way of ensuring that that happens is a temporary nationalisation so that the bank can get through into better times when the housing market is recovering again and actually will get a better price for those assets. Conservatives are wrong. The real failures here were in Labour's failure early on to properly regulate Northern Rock and stop excessive lending and stop excessive debt. This was go-go lending, frankly, on an extraordinary scale, and quite why the Financial Services Authority wasn't alive to the dangers I don't know. And the second big failure on Gordon Brown's watch when he was Chancellor was the failure to coordinate the three big agencies that actually had to deal with this crisis: the Treasury, the Financial Services Authority and the Bank of England. And frankly, it is extraordinary that everywhere else in the world including the euro area and the United States, manages to get through this credit crunch without having a major run on a bank, and we've had the first major run on a bank in this country since Over-End Gurney in the middle of the 19th century. What a shambles.
Jacqui Smith.
Well, first of all, let's just remember this did start, as you rightly said, Chris, with the credit crunch in the United States. It came into effect a business in Northern Rock, which frankly didn't have the business model that it needed to have, which was set up to that extent to fail. And the government had to decide, we had to decide what was the best thing to do there. And it seems to me there are some important objectives here. Firstly, we wanted to protect the money of those people who had put their savings into Northern Rock. Secondly, we wanted to make sure that the failure of Northern Rock did not act and infect the rest of the banking system and impact on the stability of the economy. And of course we wanted to make sure that we could be confident about looking after taxpayers' money. Now, we have achieved those objectives. We've done it by being clear from the beginning that we will keep open the alternatives that will enable us to safeguard the savers' money and to prevent that from
So would
leaking into the
nationalisation
rest
be a
of the
success in terms of the government's policy?
Well, what will be a success is if we do, as we set out to do, safeguard people's money, look after the taxpayers' money as well, and make sure that the economy remains stable.
You have no qualms about nationalisation?
Well, we've been very clear.
Maguire said it was no longer New Labour's line to nationalise things, but you would be in favour of nationalisation and say, we can hold our heads up high, we've done this.
The point here, David, is that we've been very clear since the beginning that we want the best alternative to deliver those objectives. We have had a consistent approach. To be fair, Chris has had a consistent approach. The people that have chopped and changed throughout this are the Tories who supported us wholeheartedly.
You're having a real love-in with the Liberal Democrats tonight, aren't you?
Well, I have to say,
I'm not sure
it isn't reciprocal, I'm afraid.
It probably won't
It
last.
isn't reciprocal.
OK, the woman in the third row there.
Why is it in Britain that we are the only country that are in this mess with the banks, when it's happened in other countries, i.e. Germany, for instance, and all the other banks have stepped in and shored them up? Why can't that happen here?
OK.
Why can't our other banks? I mean, it's in their interest, surely, to make sure that this bank does not go down.
Briefly, Jacqui Smith, can you answer that, and then I go to the man up there?
Well, what happened, of course, was that the system worked as it should do, and the Bank of England did lend the money in order to protect the money that people had put in, and did succeed in making sure that that didn't impact on the rest of the economy in the way that would obviously have been disastrous.
You cannot argue that the system worked as it should do when you had queues of depositors trying to get their money out of Northern Rock. The first time that has happened in over 100 years. And when the basic chapters in the economics textbook say we don't need this anymore because we have lender of last resort, bank panics are over. For the first time, we've actually had a bank panic. But that was part of the plan, according to you? I mean, come on.